This is an Urbanary interview. Urbanary. The podcast exploring how we understand and live urban spaces.
So, as I said, the first question would be asking you about yourself. So, how you describe your professional background and the main focus of your work, both personally, but also regarding the project you are part of and the one we are interviewing.
Okay. So, I'm an Israeli Jew or a Jewish Israeli from Jerusalem. I work at the Settlement Watch project of Peace Now. Peace Now is an Israeli organization advocating for peace in Israel. Our main issue in the last few decades is the fight against the occupation. We believe that one of the biggest obstacles for peace and for the end of occupation is the settlements. And so the project Settlement Watch was established in order to bring the issue of settlements all the time to public awareness, to not to let go of the issue, to make as much as controversy as possible over settlements. And in order to do it, we try to maintain as much information as possible about settlements, to be like a resource or a source of information and of also interpretation of the facts. So that's one basic thing we do. The project today is of two people, me and my colleague Yoni. We go out to the field to see what they're doing on the ground, and we analyze government decisions. We also try to get information from the government that is not published directly. We sometimes take legal measures in order to try to either block something or to bring it into the public debate, or to use the legal tool as part of the campaign, or as part of the effort to affect public opinion and affect the decision makers. We almost everything that we write, we also translate into English, and therefore we are a source of information also for international community. And we do have contacts with diplomats, with journalists. We don't. We try. Most our goal is to affect Israeli public opinion. So we do much more effort in Hebrew than in English, but still the international discourse is part of the internal discourse in Israel, and it's also a very important tool to affect the policies of Israel. So that's in general what we're about.
Okay, thank you. And I think for us it would be interesting, as you also mentioned, to understand a bit better how do these settlements actually come to exist. So could you walk us through how a settlement is usually established? What are the first steps? How does the process work from a planning or political perspective work? Also because, as you said, you are also observing governance decisions. So I think for us it would be nice to understand a bit better, how does it work?
It has been always a mix of bottom up and a top down process. In general, the settlement activity since 1967 till today. It's important for me to say that all the responsibility and effectively the body behind the settlements is the government. Like if the government decided not to support settlements, they cannot exist even one day. However, many things seem to happen or do happen from bottom up, like settlers organize and build something, and then the government would come. But in general, if we're looking back since 1967 to today, the vast majority of settlements started with either with government decision officially or with unofficial government decision or government body that did the planning, either the legal, planning process or just the planning on a piece of paper that is not official, and then the government also in the past until the beginning of the 90s, the government itself would do the construction. Even I think back in the 70s, or there were government companies that do the work. They changed that, but in like the last 3-4 decades, maybe, the government has a different way to initiate the construction, which is by publishing tenders or call for bids for contractors to buy the rights to build something, and then the contractor would buy the right and build it and then sell it to settlers. So there is a legal process of how to build a settlement, quote unquote, legally. All settlements are illegal according to international law, but according to Israeli regulations, there is a way to establish a settlement. So you need the planning, and then, you need the land to be available. So it cannot be privately owned by Palestinians because international law is not allowing it. So it should be something called public land. So there is a whole system of creating or making land, public land, which is called many times state land, although, we're not the state here. And if you have the right to the land, then you can make the plan. Plans can be made, legally, either by municipalities, by ministries, or bodies that got a specific permit to be planners. I cannot just initiate a plan somewhere. It's only if you are a recognized body for planning, or you are the owner of the land. That's also a possibility. So you make the plan, it has an approval process, and then the implementation, it depends which kind of settlement it is. Is it urban settlement that is managed by the Ministry of Housing? That's one path. If it's rural or more smaller ones, they have a different path. And then comes so many bodies and details of how they allocate the land. And it's really complicated. I don't know if complicated, but it's a very long explanation to have all the details of how the settlements are built. maybe, I don't know, for the sake of I don't know what you're interested exactly in, but there is a phenomena since the 19th. It was also beforehand, but after, we had Oslo Accords with the Palestinians in 1993, and Israel actually obliged not to continue with settlements, but it wasn't explicit in the agreement. So and it was led by Prime Minister Rabin, who was assassinated. And then after Rabin was assassinated, Netanyahu was elected, and he was against the Oslo process. So he renewed the construction in settlements. But until this particular government, they refrained from announcing new settlements. It's like, no, we don't build new settlements. We only build in existing settlements, and we only, natural growth and excuses like that, not to be too blatantly violating the agreement. So they decided, so they started the new phenomena, which is called the outposts, which are settlements that are built illegally with the support of the government, but not officially. Um, and the government will say, no, it's not legal, it's not official, it's not a settlement, then we are not violating anything. But on the ground, they built, like in 10 years, 100 of those new settlements. Okay, and now in the last 2 years, it's a crazy situation now. They built hundreds of those now, but and then gradually along the years, they started to retroactively legalize those outposts. So that's another way. I mean, I think since Oslo, since the 90s, or since 1992, when Rabin was elected, we didn't have any settlement that was planned in advance officially and got a government decision to be established and then established. It was always settlers who established it by themselves, illegally, and retroactively legalized. But this is not exactly true, because those settlers were also organized by governmental bodies or mainly by the municipalities of the settlements, who are like local governance, that they do most of the crimes. They have public money, but they are not the government. They are local government, and they allocate it to whatever they want illegally. They don't. It's much easier for them to violate the law than for the government itself. So they do a lot of the work. I hope it's not too details for you.
No, I think it's very interesting. I actually have one question, because at a certain point you mentioned that the system is somehow to make the land state land, public land, so then you can start the process. But how do they make the land a state land?
Okay. This is we have the existing laws in the West Bank. Israel occupied it from Jordan. The Jordanian law is based on what was before, which is the British Mandate laws, that was based on what was before, which is the Ottoman Empire laws. So it's a build of layers of laws. And the Ottoman law of land, which is like in the basis of all of the laws, said something about cultivation and ownership. Said that land is owned by someone if it's cultivated. if it's used. But if it's not used, then the empire takes it. It was legislated in the 19th century in order to encourage the use of the land and the income, that the empire will have more taxes. And then the along the years, it was when they registered land under the British mandate or under the Jordanians, they took a place and made parcellation and all that. And if there was no one to claim ownership or to say I was using it or whatever, then it was registered on the name of the public or of the name of the state. So what Israel did was to interpret the law a little differently and to say that we can initiate a survey and look for land that is not cultivated and declare it state land. So Israel did huge, in the 80s, they went with the helicopters and took photos or whatever and said, this is not cultivated, this is not cultivated, okay, it's state land. And declared almost 1 million dunams as state land in the West Bank. And they continue to do it now in smaller scales. But again, this government is now renewing and making it even more than the past. So that's the main tool. They can also they used military orders in the past, but until 1979, when the Supreme Court in Israel stopped it and said military agreements or military excuse is for security. You cannot use it for settlements. So at the beginning, they said settlements are part of the security, so we can seize the land for security reasons and settle there. But in 1979, the Supreme Court of Israel said you cannot do it anymore, so they started to use more this declaration on state land. Now they are trying more a new thing, which is land registration that eventually will lead to registration of a lot of land on the name of the state. It's like the declaration of state land, but it's more. It's a little different. They decided to start that. We'll see what will happen with it.
And I have another question on this discussion. So, is there, because from what I understood, everything that you told us is basically illegal, even though the government, so the public authority somehow supported. So, is there some written laws that support this illegal activity? So, for example, in Italy, we have the planning law that regulate how the state govern the Italian territory. And I am wondering, how does the written law of the Israeli state works in this sense?
Well, we have a complicated, because it's occupied territory, so the laws of the Knesset, of our parliament, are not valid. It's not part of Israel officially. The laws are military laws. So the government is so you could look at military laws, but then there are also government decisions that have, it's not a law, but it's considered part of the regulations. Like if the action of the government is in contradiction to a government decision, then it's a basis for cancellation of that action. Okay, but the government can undo its decision. Okay, so so you have government decisions, then you have the military law, and the military gets its order from the Israeli government. So it's not that there is one law that you can read and learn how settlements are built. It's many. It's a wide system of regulations and laws.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so moving on more on your work. So you were telling us that you somehow produce knowledge for let everyone knows about how the settlements work, etc. But I read on your website that you also try to prevent the settlement expansion or stop illegal settlement activities. And what are the tools or strategies that you have used and proven most effective or even most challenging in doing so?
Yeah, you know, if I tell myself that my job is to stop settlements, then I'm a total failure. I'm doing it 20 years. The number of settlers almost doubled, or maybe already doubled. So I think my job is to make it harder to settle. And I don't know what would have happened if we weren't doing our job. I mean, we will never know. But to prevent, to stop the settlements is something nobody managed to do. What we are trying to do, or so we have this classic thinking of public opinion, pressure on the government, and change of policy. Okay. Unfortunately, public opinion in Israel wasn't strong enough against settlements. It's not, I believe, although settlements are supported by all governments since 1967, it doesn't mean that all Israelis support positively the settlements. I think it's more that they don't care, or they don't think it's important, or that they have a sentiment that if it's bad for the Palestinians, it must be good for us, or things like that. But all this is the way I see the public opinion. But the bottom line is that all governments found it suitable to build in settlements. So they did. So we try to affect public opinion. We also see that the international community plays a very important role, and specifically the United States. So when we had chances with an administration that is more interested in the issue, they would listen more, and our input was had meaning. Not always did it work, and not always did the Americans take enough steps in order to do anything. And of course, also Europe and other countries, that's from time to time we can see actions or that maybe restrain Israel. A third way is the legal way. that maybe in the past it was more effective than today. Peace Now already from the 90s started, took legal action against settlement activity. There was even one famous ruling case in 1990 by Peace Now, arguing that all settlements are illegal according to international law, where the court decided not to decide, and said, "Oh, it's not for the court to decide that; it's for the government to decide such a thing." So, according to Israeli courts, settlements are not legal and not legal. But, for instance, so we have all those illegal outposts. So we started to go to court against them, and said to the government, if you are saying that it's illegal, so you have to evict it. So when we started that in 2005, and also we, based on knowledge that we managed to get, which was the status of the land, it was not known at all. I mean, the whole idea that Israel built on private Palestinian land was not known until we got a leak from the civil administration and a map that showed that many of the settlements are violating even the Israeli regulations. And then we started to go to court and say, demolish or force the government to implement the law. And what happened with that was, in cases where the government could legalize the outpost, the outcome was that they told the court, okay, we will retroactively legalize it, but we will not evict it. And only in handful cases where the land was registered on Palestinian names, and you cannot do this game of land declaration, only then did the court force the government to evict the outposts. But it also brought retaliation from the right wing and from the government. The retaliation was in two main things. One was the establishment of an organization in the right wing by who's Bezalel Smotrich, who's now a minister, that took our petitions and copied it, and instead of talking about illegal outposts, they said illegal construction of Palestinians in the West Bank, because Israel is not giving permits to Palestinians in the West Bank. So they are illegal. So they started to push pressure on the legal system, on the courts, and on the government. If you're claiming that it's about the law, enforcement of the law, so start enforcing also on Palestinians. And it was not only putting pressure on the courts and the government, it was also a very powerful legal, public argument for public opinion. We were all the time, I mean, even today, whenever we say this is illegal, you should take it down, then people will say, but what about the Palestinian houses, etc. So that's one thing. But I think the more deep change is that the government, in order to defend the settlements, which is, all this idea of settlements is not only illegal according to international law, it's all messed up. You have to be a liar in order to do it, because we are occupying the people there. We're not giving them permits, we're not allocating them land, we're not planning for them, we're not allowing them to live, only Israelis. So it's all based on violations of human rights all the time. And I'm sorry, there is a phone call here. So eventually, just a second, how do I turn this off? I know how. Okay. So eventually, we started to see the legal advisor of the government that once, I mean, in the past, if I would write a letter, this outpost is built on private land, and they would say, yes, it's private land, it's illegal, etc. Now they will never say private land. They will say land that is not state land, because who said it is private? We don't want to acknowledge that it's private land. And they started to change the interpretation of the laws so that it will be more in favor of the settlers, and also started to not only an interpretation of the law, but also the laws themselves. And the politicians even legislated a law that said you can actually confiscate land for settlement. Now, this is a direct violation of international law. So we petitioned against it in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court canceled that law. So the right wing started to say, who is the Supreme Court? It's not elected. How can they cancel laws of the parliament? It's not okay. So they started to put pressure on the legal system, on the courts. And we had a minister of justice to nominate right-wing judges to change the whole system. And so today we are facing a whole different court than 20 years ago when we started those kinds of petitions. And I think part of the crisis in Israel, of the judicial reform, that the government is trying to break democracy, is part of it, or I think even strong part of it comes from the eagerness of the right wing, of the settler right, to continue and violate international law and violate human rights, and to do it without the very little interruptions by the court. I mean, the court event was not really standing against settlements. It allowed a lot of settlements. It allowed a huge land grab. It allowed the whole occupation to continue, but with limitations. From time to time, they had things that the court said no, but it's not enough for the settlers. So I think part of the crisis that we're in Israel, and maybe it's an outcome that it's a bad outcome. Maybe if we knew in advance that this would be, maybe we shouldn't have taken this path. However, that's a path, that's a tool we have, and we're trying to use it. So public opinion, international, and legal. I think that's the main. We don't have more tricks. I mean, public opinion would include demonstrations, etc. There is also that's it. I think, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm also interested in because I saw that in your website there is this settlement watch project where you also map and sort of create a sort of database of the settlements. How do you gain those data. So it's mainly field work. So you go there, see the space, and then you try to map it. Or do you also use some sources, more formal sources, let's say?
It depends what. I mean, there are things that are available formally, like status of land, if it's declared state land or is it not. Um, the plans that are approved, this we take from public publications. Sometimes we need to ask for the information according to freedom of information law. Um, um, so it includes GIS layers that we get from the authorities. But in terms of where they put a new outpost, where they opened a new road, these are things that are not available. And because it's a lot, then we spend a lot of time on the ground. We also buy every year an aerial photo of all the West Bank, together with other organizations, because it's very, very expensive. And we analyze it, we go through it, and we count the construction on the ground, just, having a database of how much was built on the ground and things of the sort. So we try to get information from wherever we can.
Okay, thanks. I think now I would change a bit the scale of the question. So if we observe the Israeli context, we can, I guess, see that colonization seems to take different forms across territories. In Jerusalem, for what we could read and research, we saw that it's mainly through urban policies that constrain Palestinian neighborhoods, as you said, for example, not giving them building rights. As you explain us now, in the West Bank is through the physical establishment of the settlements, and in Gaza is through long-term destruction and siege. But the question is, how do you see these different dynamics connecting to each other in the whole colonization project of the space?
I don't know. It's eventually it's a whole policy of Israel that you use different tools in order to implement it. If you want to encourage people to move somewhere, then you need to plan for a road, and you need to build places to work, and you need to build schools and all that. And there's different ministries and different regulations and different sets of laws. And especially in Israel, where we have different statuses, occupied territories, West Bank, Gaza, which we don't deal with it now. I mean, since Israel, in the settlement watch, there are no settlements in the West Bank since 2005 in Gaza. So we're not following settlements there. And in East Jerusalem, which is occupied territory, but officially under Israeli laws, then they use the tools they can, but it's like, it's not that there is one person that is behind all of this, but it's one policy, I would say, that is going somewhere. So you have people who know how to do it in Jerusalem, people who know how to do it there, and this is how it works. I don't know if it's an answer to.
Yeah, I think it was mainly to understand what is your perspective on the whole project. So I guess that this is good as an answer. So now I have a question that maybe, I don't know what is your background, so if you're a planner or not, but if you're not, maybe you won't be answering like specifically to the question I have for you, but if you can reflect maybe. So as researcher in urban studies, we are, as I said, interested in understanding planning, which in theory should be a technical tool, how it has been used as a political tool. So I was wondering, how do you maybe see the future of planning in Israel and in the occupied territories, which maybe lead to the broader question of how do you see the future of the context of Israel and the occupied territory. So it's whether you could answer by saying me what is the future role of urban planning in supporting or not supporting the colonization process, or you could even just tell me how do you see the future of the territory. So how do you envision?
What I see is that planning is one of the key tools for maintaining occupation and for undermining Palestinian presence and violating their human rights, civil rights. So that's very clear. What will the future be? I mean, planning is a tool. It's a tool for policy, and you can use it like every tool. You can use it for the good or for the bad. Like I don't know if it's a good example. Like nuclear energy can be used for killing and can be used for you know. So it's a tool, and yeah, and we're trying now to think of ideas of if we are going to have a different government. Um, we hope that we will have elections soon and that Netanyahu will not be elected, and that the coalition that will be there will include some people that are against settlements. Okay. And we want to be ready with ideas of what can they do. And I think the planning issue is very, very important there. So, for instance, recommendations that we're thinking of would be to plan for Palestinians in the West Bank. And if we have a plan for one of the villages that is today in, Palestinian village, that will be approved, then we save this village from demolitions, and we manage to maintain Palestinian presence in war land. So it's not going to end the occupation, but it might allow Palestinians to maintain or try to maintain more chances for a future agreement or future arrangement, because part of solving it or ending the occupation is to find a political resolution. And I believe that the only political resolution is to have two states, to have a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, independent and full dignity and for all of the Palestinians. And for that, we will have to evict most of the settlements. We cannot have a Palestinian state and Israeli controlling so much of the land and so many people, Israelis inside. So we will need to change all the planning, all the zoning, everything.
Thank you. I have maybe one last question, because I think that our main restriction and I think issue with the podcast is that we were never able to see physically how it is what we're talking about. So as you are kind of an expert, I would say, on that. We would like to ask if you could share with us a story that you feel capture how settlements operate on the ground, something that for you really illustrate what's at stake. It could be, I don't know, the story of one settlement or how one of the settlements you know better is constructed. I don't know, like a story that you would like to share with us for letting us have a more a proper physical imaginaries of what we are talking about.
Maybe I should tell like something from very recent months that to illustrate the situation right now. A few months ago, the government issued a decision to establish new settlements with a list of 22 of them. One of them, not far from west of Ramallah, in areas where there was never settlements before. And the area is considered today private Palestinian land, so it wasn't taken officially yet. And the area is rural. Palestinians cultivate a lot of it. And there are even some houses. Some of the Palestinians own land and build a house just out there in the hills, not part of a village. It's usually not where they stay all the time, but they go there for weekends, they go there for the time of the cultivation or whatever. But there are a few houses also scattered in this area. And in parallel to the government decision to establish a settlement there, settlers moved in, like a group of like 5 settlers. 2 of them are recruited as reservist soldiers, and they came to Palestinians who live where they came, like 100 meters from where they established their outpost, and told them, you need to go. You need to leave, you need to pack all your stuff and go. So he called a friend of mine, because he knew an Israeli friend of mine that went with him together to try to go back to his house. And the soldiers there stopped them and took the keys of the car and stopped them for hours and tell you're not allowed here. And there is no law that says that they are not allowed there. And then several weeks later, I came there also with a Palestinian, and we wanted to go visit the land, and he said, I'm too scared because there are so many attacks of settlers against Palestinians in the West Bank, and also in this area, those settlers who settled started to kick out violently Palestinians from their land. And so I came with a journalist, and the Palestinian said, I'm waiting for you back there in the village. And we tried to go in his house, but the settlers stopped us. And then, because it was a journalist there, he called the spokesperson of the military and said, there is no legal reason to stop us. So they sent the soldiers who said, okay, you can go. And I asked the soldier, but if a Palestinian would come here, the owner of this house, no, he is not allowed here. And suddenly, unofficially and illegally, the Palestinians is not allowed in his house. He had to leave the house. I visited the house. I saw the settlers moved in. We saw another house where they broke in also. And they have now a lawyer that wrote letters. And I just spoke with this lawyer. We didn't get any answer. We're talking about 3 months already. And it says there is no chance to win this case because there was a government decision. The way the military, the settlement work today is the government support them. As soon as there is a petition in court, they will say there is a government decision to establish a settlement there. We need to secure the settlement so Palestinians cannot enter, and that's it. And I think, I sometimes think if it's worth the effort to say, let's go to courts, let's try to fight it, and maybe we will force the military to allow him to go back to his land or to his house. But we see in so many cases that even when the court says, okay, there is no problem, you can go back to your home, they cannot really force the military to protect the Palestinians from violent settlers. So the outcome is unlikely to allow the Palestinian back home. And then I think if I want to get this Palestinian back to his land, I should end the occupation. I mean, try to fight this point on the ground is so hard or so difficult that maybe we should go. I mean, maybe we should put all our efforts in stopping the whole idea because it's so hard. Sorry, it's not the best story I could tell, but that's what came up.
I think it's very interesting also because, as I said, we never been there, so we don't know really how, apart from what we read and what we could listen from your voices or other voices. So I think any story for us it was very interesting anyway.
Urbinary is produced in collaboration with Polyradio and the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies at Politecnico di Milano.